Nice to see you all. Listen, we're going to wait a few minutes because we still have some more folks coming in, but I wanted to welcome you all and also ask for your help in terms of getting everyone seated. If there are, we were planning on about 100, we've got 160 chairs, and I think we're just about full, and we're going to have more folks than that, which is good in one way, but we want to make sure that anyone with a handicap or folks who are elderly who need a seat, if you could try to make if you're able to stand up to make your seat available, we'd really appreciate that. And maybe if there are some young children who don't mind going maybe on the floor, if you don't mind, we just want to try to get as many people who need a seat to sit down. Now I should mention, this is not a great option, but there's also a room back here. It doesn't have chairs, and you're not going to be able to see the meeting real great, but if you need some space, there is some space back there. So we're going to get started in about 5 minutes, and really glad you're all here. Thanks.
Yeah, good. Okay, good.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, hello. We're going to start the meeting now. Really appreciate everyone's help in getting folks seated. Wow, what a great turnout in Jericho. Really, really nice. Listen, my name's Phil Monk. I'm proud to work for your United States Senator, and I'm not going to give a long introduction, but I think you all know Bernie is fighting the fight every day on so many important issues in Washington. I think you're going to enjoy this town meeting. We have some wonderful guests that you're going to be hearing from. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you your United States Senator, Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. Thank you, Jericho. Wow. Let me begin by thanking all of you for coming out this morning. This is a beautiful turnout, and it's nice to see some kids. And if the kids want to come in here and they don't mind, they can sit down right here on the floor, because I think we're going to get backed up a little bit. Anybody can sit on the floor. You know, as I think about democracy and what's happening in this country, and we're going to get to the Citizens United decision in a moment, and you think about a handful of billionaires putting ugly 30-second ads on the air on television, and that's their definition of democracy. This is our definition of democracy. So we're going to have a fun morning. I'm here to answer any questions that anyone has. We want to hear your comments. And to be very honest with you, it is terribly important for me to do these meetings, and we're going to do a whole lot. Because when you live and work in Washington, D.C., and you deal with that stuff every single day, it is very easy to forget about the reality that faces real human beings. It's another world, you know, $1 trillion here and $1 billion there. That's Washington. So it's great to be back doing these meetings all over the state. And let me begin by thanking Andrea Hook at the Jericho Community Center for making the facility available. And we've got a great panel, and I'm going to start it off, and then they're going to go on to talk a little bit, maybe more about some of the local issues that face us. And you have your state representative, Bill Frank, who's here. You have State Senator Ginny Lyons, who's here. We have Tom Torty, who's the executive director of the Lake Champlain Regional Chamber of Commerce. And we have Marissa Parisi, who's the executive director of Hunger Free Vermont. Also in the audience, and we'll want to hear from them briefly if they'd like to say a word later, Representative George Till, Susan Elliott from Congressman Welch's office, Gay Simonton, you all know the former Speaker of the House, Cindy Macklin, principal at the Underhill ID School, Paul Berman, Champlain Valley Head Start, Karen Madden, Director of Student Support Service at Johnson State. So thank you all for coming. Let me begin by trying to give you an overview of what's going on in Washington, some of the work that our office is trying to deal with. I don't think I have to tell anybody in this room, and it's important that the younger people know that we are living through the most difficult moment in American history since the Great Depression. And what we are looking at is unemployment unacceptably high. Now, the good news is you've seen unemployment going down a bit. That's excellent. We hope that that continues. But real unemployment, hope everybody understands this, is not the official statistic that you see in the papers. It's not 8.2%. Real unemployment, including those people who have given up looking for work, high unemployment areas, those people in Vermont and America who are working 20 hours a week when they want to be working 40 hours a week, is certainly closer to 14 or 15% than it is to 8.2%. All right, so that's the first reality, and that is unacceptably high. And then if you dissect those numbers and you look at young people, one of the real sad things that's going on in this country, you have kids graduating high school, want to go out and start a career, kids graduating college, unable to find jobs, unemployment rate very, very high for younger people. And really one of the emotional tragedies all over this country is you're finding people who are 50, 55, 60, 65 who had hoped to be working, have a job to the end of their careers, make some money, put it in the bank for their retirement. Many of those people have been laid off, and if they're lucky enough to get a new job, they're working at significantly lower wages than the wages that they had. So unemployment, very, very high. Good news, numbers are going down. Better news, here in Vermont, we are doing better than most of the country. Our unemployment rate, official 5.1, 5.2%, lower in Chittenden County, but still much too high. When you talk about economics, unemployment is one important index you want to look at. It is not the only one. And sometimes we ignore wages and income. Fact, in the last 10 years, median family income has gone down by $3,000. There are millions of people in Vermont and around this country today who are working longer hours for lower wages than they used to. Some of you may have seen the President's State of the Union speech, and he emphasized he wants to see manufacturing grow. I absolutely agree with him. In the last 10 years, we have lost 60,000 factories in the United States of America. So when you go shopping, you say, hey, why can't I buy a product made in the USA? That's the reason why. We can talk about that broader issue. But here's something we have to be mindful of. We have seen in recent months, last year, an uptick in manufacturing jobs. Good news. Bad news is that some of those manufacturing jobs are now paying 20, 30, 40% less than they used to pay. So when people are saying, well, we're bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States because the United States is now becoming more competitive with China. Got that? That is not good news. So we want to, I want to, and I think many of you want to see a rebuilding of our manufacturing sector, but at living wages, good wages. In terms of poverty, and we're going to be talking about that later, we have Marissa here. We'll say a few words about that. But in terms of poverty in America, just a couple of points. There are more people living in poverty today than at any time in the history of our country. We've done hearings on poverty and seniors. It's not a pretty picture. Everybody in this room should be aware that the United States of America today has by far the highest rate of childhood poverty of any nation on earth. About 22% of our kids are living in poverty. How do we deal with that issue? Now, so that's kind of an overview of where we are economically. When you tune on the TV and watch what's going on in Washington, most of the debate centers around the deficit and how we deal with that, what choices we make. This country has a $15+ trillion national debt, the accumulation of many deficits. We have about a $1.1, $1.2 trillion deficit this year. That is a lot of money. I don't think that there is a great deal of disagreement among anybody saying that we've got to get a handle on the deficit and the national debt. What the whole debate is about is how did we get that deficit and what is the fairest, best, most productive way of addressing the deficit crisis. I think the facts are pretty clear as to how we got the deficit that we got. First of all, we have to remember, back in 2000, when Clinton left office, this country was running a significant surplus. surplus. And what the expression they use in Washington, the surplus was going to be there as far as the eye could see, gradually lowering the national debt. Now, what happened during the Bush administration, a few things happened. Number one, we went to war in Afghanistan. We went to war in Iraq. Hard to tell you exactly what the cost of those wars will end up being, but this is what we do know. We're going to be paying for those wars until the last veteran is taken care of 60, 70 years from now. Estimate is that those wars combined will cost at least $3 trillion. How did we pay for those wars? By giving tax breaks. We didn't pay for those wars. We put them up on the credit card. So one of the reasons that the deficit has gone up is 2 unpaid wars. Didn't pay a nickel for them. Number 2, under Bush, we gave very significant tax breaks. A lot of them went to the wealthiest people in this country. Thirdly, as a result of the greed, recklessness, and in my view, illegal behavior on Wall Street, this country was plunged into the worst recession since the Great Depression. And when you're in a recession, less revenue comes in. Businesses go out of business. Workers lose their job. Less revenue comes into the federal government. Less revenue coming in, tax breaks and wars equals significant deficits. That's where we are right now. Now, the debate that you're hearing, the very animated, controversial, confrontational debates that you're hearing in Washington have a lot to do. Okay, how do you deal with the deficit? What's the best way to do it? Some of my Republican friends say, okay, well, look, we got a deficit. This is how you deal with it. We have to cut Social Security, you got to cut Medicare, Medicaid, environmental protection, education, many, many other programs. And by the way, while we're doing that, let's give tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country. Well, that is one way I suppose you could do it. Not a way that I support. The other way that some of us are looking at is that right now in this country, we have the most unequal distribution of wealth and income that we have ever had since 1928. We have the most unequal distribution of wealth and income since of any country on earth. We have today, and it's important to know this, and I'm happy that during the last year there has been more discussion. I know many of you have heard me talking about this issue for many years. Hasn't been talked about nationally. Top 400 wealthiest people in this country own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million Americans. Top 1% earn more income than the bottom 50%. In the last 10 years, 80% of all new income went to the top 1%. Meanwhile, in terms of taxation, the effective, i.e. real tax rate for the wealthiest people in this country is the lowest in decades. You've read what Warren Buffett had to say about it. You may have heard the discussion about Mitt Romney's tax returns, a very, very wealthy guy at 14%, etc., etc. Furthermore, corporate taxation is, in my view, in many cases, very, very low. You have about a quarter of major American corporations not paying a nickel in taxes. We estimate that we're losing about $100 billion every single year because of tax havens in the Cayman Islands and in Bermuda. So one way some of us believe that you can deal with the deficit rather than cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid is to ask the wealthiest people in this country to start paying their fair share of taxes and end many of the loopholes that large corporations enjoy. Furthermore, I think all of us want to make sure that the United States has a strong defense system. But let us be clear. Since 1997, defense spending in this country has tripled. Despite the demise of the Soviet Union, we now spend more money on defense than every other country on earth combined. Can we make judicious cuts in the military? I think we can. So I raise those issues to tell you that there are different approaches to a deficit reduction. One side says cut programs that impact the elderly, the children, the middle class. Some of us are looking in a very different direction. Now, if I would ask people in this room, or people all over the state or country, what the most important issue that they see this country having to address, they would say the jobs crisis. Very briefly, where do I think we can go forward? Number one, our infrastructure. What do we mean by infrastructure? Infrastructure are roads, are bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, rail system, older schools, broadband, infrastructure. Our infrastructure in many respects all over this country is literally collapsing. In terms of rail, we're way, way behind Europe, Japan, even China. There are pockets in Vermont, we're working on this, where you can't get decent cell phone service, can't get high-quality broadband. Bridges in Vermont all over this country in serious disrepair. Most economists will tell you that the fastest way to put people back to work, and that's all kinds of people, it's not just blue-collar construction workers, goes all the way on up, is rebuilding our infrastructure. So some of us, it's not sexy, but it is extremely important. And it not only puts people to work in meaningful jobs, it makes our country more productive and internationally competitive. Now, there's another area out there, and if you would ask me, you know, we think back, and I want to relate this story, because I know sometimes people get depressed about the political situation. I was up in Richford a couple of years ago, and there was an event to honor World War II veterans. And I was so pleased, a whole lot of veterans who were there. I didn't know so many of them were still alive. It was a wonderful event. And the meeting began with a young lady who helped organize the event playing a video. She had a video. And this was the video. The video was December 8th, 1941. Remember that? Well, we don't remember. Most of us don't remember that. That was the day that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President of the United States, went before Congress to declare war on Japan. It was the day after Pearl Harbor. On that day, the United States, frankly, was ill-prepared for war, for a variety of reasons. Hitler was marching throughout Europe. The Japanese were marching throughout Asia. The United States had just been attacked. And a lot of people said, my God, how are we going to do this? We've got to fight two wars. A war in Asia. We knew the war with Germany was coming. How can we do this? That was December 1941. 2 years later, the war ended, of course, in 1945, but 2 years later, for all intent and purposes, that war was won because the United States converted its economy into a war economy. It made the tanks, the guns, the uniforms that our soldiers, the airplanes that our soldiers needed. In 2 years, the war was won. And I raised that issue to show you that when we become mobilized, when we have the political will to accomplish problems, there is no end to what we can do. And one of the issues out there, and I am sad to have to tell you the truth, it's an issue we are not dealing with, and that is the issue of global warming, which is, to my mind, the great planetary crisis of our day and the great challenge of this moment. I believe the good news is that we now have the technology and the know-how to, in fact, address that issue. We just don't have the political will. What do I mean by that? I mean that right now we can move aggressively to transform our energy system away, from foreign oil. We're importing $350 billion a year in foreign oil. B, from fossil fuel in general. C, move it to weatherization and energy efficiency. That means getting cars that are getting 50, 60 miles per gallon or more. It means weatherizing our homes. It means moving to wind, solar, geothermal, biomass, and other sustainable energies. Now, when you do that, you not only get us out of wars in the Mideast for oil, you not only reverse global warming and make this country a leader around the world in selling technology to China and other countries, you know what else you do? You start creating millions of jobs right here in America. So I think that's an important issue. All right, I'm going on too long, and what I want to do is wrap it up by just telling you just a few of the issues that I am working on literally day by day right now. Social Security is probably the most successful program that the federal government has ever developed. It has, in fact, accomplished what it was supposed to do when it was formed. In the early 1930s, before Social Security, 50% of the elderly in this country lived in poverty. Because of Social Security, that number is too high, but it is 10%. Social Security, as you also know, helps people with disabilities, helps widows and orphans. Now, every day you're going to see an article, you're going to read something, you hear something on the radio, see something on TV about how Social Security is going bankrupt, Social Security is not going to be there for your kids, and how we got to make radical changes in Social Security, how we got to cut it or privatize it. So let me be very clear, and I say this as chairman of the Defending Social Security Caucus in the U.S. Senate. Social Security today has a surplus of $2.5 trillion. Social Security can pay out every benefit owed to every eligible American for the next 25 years. Social Security, because it is funded by the payroll tax, not the U.S. Treasury, has not contributed one nickel to the deficit. For that reason, we are working as hard as we can against all kinds of obstacles to make sure that Social Security is not cut and that, in fact, it is strengthened. And if you ask me, how can we strengthen it? It's good for 25 years. How do you make it good for 75 years, which is what actuaries like to see, accountants like to see it. Right now, you make $1 million a year or you make $110,000 a year. You are both of those people are contributing the same amount of money into the Social Security Trust Fund. Lift that cap, start at $250,000. You will have enough money in the Social Security Trust Fund for 75 years. So Social Security is a big issue that we're staying on. Ginny Lyons is going to talk in a moment about Citizens United. Let me say a word on that. Because if you are concerned about the healthcare crisis, you're concerned about the economy, you're concerned about global warming, you're concerned about any issue, you must be concerned about this disastrous 5-4 Supreme Court decision of 2 years ago. There are, I think, 5 people in the United States of America who believe that corporations are people. Unfortunately, they are all on the United States Supreme Court. You don't have to believe me. John McCain, John and I do not agree on most issues. But John was right when he said that Citizens United was one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in the history of this country. And this is what it does. And you're seeing it. Now the American people, it's no longer a philosophical argument. People are seeing it on the ground. What it means is that billionaires like Sheldon Adelson and many others, John Paulson, literally billionaires, can sit around and decide, I'm going to pour millions and millions and millions of dollars without disclosure into this or that campaign. And you saw what went on in Florida. You may have heard what went on in Florida. Airwaves full of these ugly ads paid by what is called super PACs, funded by extremely wealthy people. And my friends, let me just say this, that is the tip of the iceberg. You are heading to a situation where the overwhelming majority of funds for politics in this country is going to come from super PACs and billionaires and corporations who can go into their own treasuries. ExxonMobil has billions and billions of dollars sitting in the treasury. They can take out, what is $50 million to them? It is coffee money for you. So we are moving toward a situation where millionaires and billionaires can dominate the political process. And that is why I'm very proud that Vermont is moving aggressively in this area. We have dozens and dozens of towns, I guess, including Jericho, who are going to be voting. And this is terribly important. What we want, we have seen Los Angeles, New York City, Portland, Oregon. Towns have already come on. I hope Vermont will lead the country in saying, we believe one person, one vote is what democracy is about, not domination by a handful of billionaires. That's not what our democracy is about. Okay, another issue out there, enormously important. I'm spending an incredible amount of time on it. I got into it and I can't get out of it now. And that is trying to save the post Postal Service. It's not a sexy issue, but it is a big issue. Here's what's at stake on that, and this will be my last point. Postal Service has problems, financial problems, because, among other things, obviously, people are using a lot of email. First-class mail is down. No question about that. True in America, true all over the world. Second of all, because you're in a recession, revenues are down. Thirdly, which I won't go into all kinds of details, the Postal Service, as a result of legislation in 2006, is forced to pay $5.5 billion every single year for future retiree health benefits. No other entity, public or private, comes anywhere near close to having to pay that burden. We've been doing a lot of work on that. They got $44 billion in their health retiree program. We don't believe they need to pay any more into it. The issue here is how we can save several 100,000 jobs, how we prevent the Postal Service from closing down, as they want to, 3,700 rural post offices, including 15 in Vermont, stopping them from slowing mail delivery service, ending Saturday service. So we're working very hard on that issue. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, but we've got a plan. We're getting more and more support that's going to be coming up, we think, in a week or two. But saving the jobs, saving our Postal Service, saving rural post offices is something that we are working very, very hard on. Okay. Now, I'll be here for as long as you need me, and I want to get to our panel right now to say a few words about the issues that they are working on. As many of you know, your state representative is Bill Frank. Bill, why don't you say a few words? Oh,
okay. Good morning, and thank you for coming out. The state legislature has been in session for now 5 weeks. In 2005, when I first went down to Montpelier, the second week I was there, the state hospital was decertified by the federal government, costing Vermont about $7 million. And I knew, being on the Human Services Committee, who took care of mental health issues, that I would be learning more about mental health in the state hospital than I ever knew or even thought I would know. That was 2005. We've been talking about it since then, the fact that the state hospital needed to be replaced for many reasons, both the physical structure and the design of it and everything. Well, when Irene hit, Governor Shumlin said that we will not send patients back to the Waterbury complex, to the state hospital, and we will build a new one. And the legislature has been on a fast track, well, fast track meaning for the last 5 weeks. Being there very late at night too often didn't feel very fast to me, but just yesterday we did pass the bill out of the House, which revamps the mental health system in Vermont. It has always been one of the best systems in the nation. It's going to be even better. It's going to include much more community services. It's going to include peer services, and it's going to include a new acute building, hopefully adjacent to the Central Vermont Hospital, for those patients who need in-service acute systems, meaning that they are really a danger to themselves or other people. This is one of the things that I think everybody in the legislature is extremely proud of, that we were able to, number one, address this issue and finally have a path to helping those people who need mental health services. I'm proud of that. Second, another issue that's been going on is, since it is the redistricting issue. The Government Operations Committee has been working on that as long as the Human Services Committee. In fact, they started last summer. And it's interesting that our committee rooms are just across the hall from each other on the 3rd floor back in the corner. And so there has been a lot of activity down that hall of people coming and going. But the redistricting plan has been finalized for the House. And I'm happy to report that the district that we are currently in, Chittenden 8, which included the towns of Underhill, Jericho, and Bolton, will now be renamed Chittenden 3 and be Jericho and Underhill. And Bolton is going to be in a new district called, well, actually, I guess it's not a new district, Chittenden, Washington, which will include Bolton, Buellsgord, Huntington, and Waterbury. One of the things that when I talked to the Government Operations Committee about the fact that it was pretty clear that Bolton was, because of size, that Bolton was not going, would be moved to another district, was number one, that I felt that Bolton needed to remain intact. One representative for the whole town, and number two is that I hope that it could stay in a district that had other Chittenden East school districts in it. And so I think both of those things were achieved. And then finally, a few years ago, we had a group of students at Browns River who took up the cause of studying school bus idling. It was a great opportunity for kids to get involved in politics. It was great. I still hear people tell me how much they either enjoyed it, the students enjoyed it, or the parents tell me how much the kids did. Well, this year we passed a bill designating the brown trout and the walleye pike as state fish, which is one of those things, is that all you have to do? But this was initiated by some kids in the Cornwall Elementary School asking for a resolution to honor those fish, and it has now moved up to be a state law. So this is a great way to get people involved in politics. Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are 6 state senators in Chittenden County, and we're delighted that Ginny Lyons is here as a state senator. Ginny has been one of the leaders, among other things, on the Citizens United issue. Ginny?
You haven't given that away yet?
Thank you all. Thank you, Bernie. Appreciate being here.
Thank you, Ginny.
Of course, you get the point. Money is not speech. And the very disastrous decision that was made in 2010 of Citizens United has equated speech with money. And we, as Bernie has said, I really don't have to say a lot more. I mean, Senator Sanders has expressed it extremely well. And while we value our businesses for as a basis of our economic development, we value the voice of individuals as a basis of our democracy. I want to thank so many of you in this room for the work that you're doing. Last year I introduced JRS 11, which is now in the Senate Government Operations Committee and has actually been modified and improved along the way, and I've helped with that improvement, I trust. That resolution states that natural persons, the rights of natural persons are protected under the United States Constitution, and that money is not speech. We all know that corporations are not people. The unfortunate decision in 1886 by the Supreme Court had a head note. The head note in the Santa Clara versus Southern Pacific Railroad decision said, well, corporations are protected under the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment protects, was a slavery amendment. One of the contributions of that non-decision was to say that corporations are protected as an impoverished class. All right, well, you can, I see that. That means something to each of us in a different way. When we see an unfettered infusion of money into our campaigns, we know that the political, economic, and democratic landscape is forever altered. That's what we're seeing. We saw it after the United States House of Representatives voted this year on the Santar pipeline. After that vote, one company from Canada donated $42 million to the representatives who voted in favor of that pipeline. We can expect to see more of that type of infusion of money into our campaigns in the future. Last year, or the 2010 election, there was one PAC in the country that had $300 million to put commercials and donate to campaigns. Right now, there are over 30 of those PACs with over $300 million each, waiting to infuse that money into the coming election. That is not what we need in our democracy. What we need in our democracy are the people who are in this room who have worked so hard to gather signatures to carry a petition to town meeting for a vote. So after I introduced the resolution last year, I heard from people all over the state. I heard from people all over the country, and I heard from people all over the globe. I heard from folks in Africa, I heard from folks in Australia, I heard from folks in Wisconsin, California, Texas, Florida, you name it. I heard from people in Underhill, Jericho, Bolton. I heard from people in towns north, south, and east and west in Vermont. But I said, I think this resolution might mean something. And so since that time, I've called folks together from those towns. Some of you are here. Bill Butler has been a leader in this, and I'm very thankful for that, because I can't do this myself. My job is to be in the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee, working with people like Dave Somington to improve our thermal efficiencies. And our goal this year is to have you pass your resolution at town meeting. We will pass our resolution out of the Senate, and with people like Bill Frank, our House of Representatives will also pass a resolution stating that corporations are not people, individual rights are protected under the United States Constitution, and money is not speech. Thank you.
There are a lot of people in Vermont and throughout this country who are in a lot of pain, a lot of economic suffering. We don't see it very often, we don't talk about it very often, and that's why I've asked Marissa Parisi, who is the Executive Director of Hunger Free Vermont, to talk a little bit about poverty in Vermont. Marissa.
Thank you. Our organization is here to work with the Senator and also work in Washington and with Bill and Ginny to help remind the community and our leaders that there is poverty, and when we start talking about cuts to programs, it really means individual lives. And in Vermont, poverty is increasing as it is in our nation. Right now, we have about 15% of Vermonters in poverty, and 40% of Vermont's children are living in low-income households. And the American standard of living is decreasing. The average American is experiencing the most rapid decrease in their standard of living since 2008. So that's an average about $1,300 less of disposable income people have than they did in 2008 at the onset of this recession. So people have less money to do things like we're all trying to do right now, feed our families, pay our fuel bills, pay our transportation costs. And we really see the gap in high income and low income populations widening. Vermont is ranked second in the nation right now for increased income inequality in the past 15 years. And that relates directly to what we're all struggling with. It relates directly to the high increase in hunger right now. And what we really believe is that we need an economic solution. People want to have the means to get food, to feed their families through dignified means and really in traditional channels. And I actually wanted to share a couple of stories from Vermonters that we've worked with about what the benefits they receive through the federal government mean to them, like things like school meals and 3 Squares Vermont and Social Security. So this is a story from Charlene in Bennington. She said, "I'm a single mom of 2 teenage children who live with me. We receive 3 Squares Vermont food stamps monthly, and if they stop this, my family will starve. I'm on Social Security disability, and this is all we have to live on. If it weren't for the food stamps, we would have no food at all. I ask that they, and they mean Washington, I ask that they reconsider the change that they want to make. My dad is 80 years old, a veteran who served in 2 wars. He is having a hard time trying to get food stamps now, as it is. Please don't take our food stamps or health insurance away from us. We need this program now more than anything. I strongly believe that if the government reduces this program even 20%, you will see the worst poverty level in Vermont, or anywhere for that matter." So what she's talking about is, as we go into 2012, we are working on the reauthorization of the Farm Bill, which includes nutrition titles, which includes the SNAP program. And with all this talk of deficit reduction in Washington, every program is up for scrutiny, and we've heard lots of talks about how we might reduce that program to save money, but that will mean cuts to Vermonters and less ability for people to buy food or pay their bills. So we really don't want to see deficit reduction at the federal level come on the backs of people who are really working hard and are really on the edge. Programs such as 3 Squares Vermont school meals have really proven successful. And in Vermont, we've done a really good job on outreach to help people have these benefits. We are second in the nation for getting people signed up for the program and lifting people above the poverty line. So that means when people got 3 Squares Vermont benefits, they might have been just on the line, just on the poverty line, but adding those benefits to income got them right over that. So you can imagine that hardworking families right now are just one major event away from being below that line. One car repair, one home repair. We all just went through this major storm with Irene. What that means if that's what's keeping people over the poverty line. So it's not the time to be cutting benefits. It's not time to be cutting programs for the poor. And what we really need is more economic opportunity so that families can have the resources that they need to buy food for their family and take care of their basic needs.
Thank you, Marissa. Marissa's remarks are a good prelude into our next speaker. Tom Torti is the Executive Director of the Lake Champlain Regional Chamber of Commerce, and we're delighted that he's here. Tom?
Thank you, Senator. I think the late Peter Frayne once dubbed us the odd couple, wondering what the representative of the business community was doing with Senator Sanders, because sometimes we're on opposite sides. But let me tell you, more often than not, we work very closely together. Senator Sanders has been instrumental in bringing the Sandia National Research Laboratory, a node of that, here to the University of Vermont to work on kind of environmental green technology, thermal technologies. We've worked together to make sure that cell phone monopolies during the breakup of the last cell phone company did not happen, and we're working very closely on environmental and alternative energy issues. So there are many issues where the business community in Vermont and the Senator's office work hand in hand. I'm going to be very brief. I want to touch on 4 issues: the Vermont business climate, the need for healthcare reform, the need for education reform, and why the Occupy Vermont movement makes sense. Let's talk about the Vermont business climate very briefly. I am really tired of hearing about how hard it is to do business in Vermont and that Vermont is bad for business and Vermont's closed. Vermont is open for business. Vermont is a good place to do business. It's not easy to come to Vermont and start a business. We don't want it to be easy. We don't want it to look like New York or Boston or other places where we've had rampant development. It has never been easy, whether you're a farmer back at the turn of the century or a logger. Vermont has never been an easy place, but it rewards those who are willing to play by the rules well. Look at the companies that are doing well here. I just made a list. Dealer.com, up to about 600 employees. My Web Grocer, just renovating in downtown Winooski. Biotech, Swan Valley Cheese, I decided to move up to the plant in Swanton. Commonwealth Yogurt down in Brattleboro, Union Street Media, MicroStream, Micro Brightfield, the incubators at Vermont Center for Emerging Technology, affiliated with UVM. People are choosing to come to Vermont. They believe in the Vermont ethic, they believe in the Vermont workforce, and they believe they can make a living here and have a better future. So Vermont's a great place to do business. Don't let other people tell you differently. Healthcare reform. There is not one issue that is crippling Vermont's small and medium-sized businesses more than the cost of health care. We pay more than any other country for health care in this country and in Vermont, and we do not have world-class results. Many other countries in Europe have much better health care results and outcomes than us. We pay the most, we don't get the best outcomes. Healthcare has worked well in this country for two groups of people. Very large corporations, unionized and non-unionized, that can afford their own independent healthcare plans, and for public sector unions. Other folks, it has not worked well for in the last 15 or 20 years. 10, 15, 20, 28% increases are unacceptable. Vermont has taken bold action, cutting-edge action, to see if we can do it better. The time for incrementalization is over. We have to see if we can reform the system because it is killing and crippling. We no longer offer small health care plans. We offer catastrophic coverage plans. Make no bones about it. The third thing I want to touch on is the need for education reform. We need to do a better job in this state educating our children for the jobs of the future. That doesn't mean everybody has to be a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics wizard, but we have to understand emerging growth sectors and train our kids. And we have to do away with the fact that we are still on an 18th century agrarian calendar and we still believe that families are run like Ozzie and Harriet. All right? Our schools stay fallow in the summers. We have times off that don't work for two working families, for single parent households. The schedules don't work. We have to do a better job. And the last thing is why Occupy Vermont and the Occupy movement makes sense, and why a business person, or the person representing the largest business organization in the state says it. My grandparents came here at the turn of the last century. One was a tailor, one was a shoemaker. They left Italy because they wanted a better life. They believed that if you worked hard and you got an education, your children could do better. And my parents did better than their parents, and hopefully my brother and I are doing better than my parents did. My kids and that generation, I'm not so sure that the American dream works as well for them as it did for my immigrant family. Senator Sanders has talked about why. The gap in wealth. The fact that the dollar today does not buy what a dollar bought 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. The fact that jobs in real dollars are paying less. We have to change that in this country. We can change that in this country. And I think, believe it or not, Vermont and the ethic that Vermont has is actually making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And I would really hope that we had business leaders around the country who were saying what Tom Torty is here today. And if we did, this country would be a hell of a lot better. Okay, let's go. Questions, comments, the floor is now yours. We have a microphone up there if you can get to it. If not, just be as loud as you can. Okay, I'll get to everybody. Our gentleman in the red shirt there. Just give us your name, please.
Bill Drisline,
Bill.
Senator, thank you so much. I speak as a veteran from during the Vietnam years.
Yes.
And I thank you for your work for the veterans. We have, as you said, 2 wars that we've just been through. When I was in the service, we didn't look for the pat on the back. We just wanted our discharge papers. And I'd like you to comment on the fact that, how can we as citizens criticize this military buildup that we have right now without a criticism of the soldiers and sailors that we have.
Good. Bill, thank you for your service, and I suspect we have many other veterans in the room. Thank you all very much for your service to our country. As it happens, Bill, I'm a member of the Veterans Committee. Just literally 2 days ago, I met with General Eric Shinseki, who's now Secretary of the VA, former head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 4-star General. I was doing a great job with the VA. And as I understand the question, Bill's question is, can we be critical of the military without being critical of the men and women who put their lives on the line doing what they're supposed to be doing? Right. Right. Now I'll tell you something. Many, many years ago, when I was a young guy, I was very critical of the war in Vietnam, and I think I was right. Yes. But the mistake during that period, which I didn't participate in, but I saw people who were attacking these young guys, who were doing what they were supposed to be. They didn't make the decision. If you want to blame somebody for the wars, you blame the president, you blame me, you blame people in the House. We're the ones who vote for the wars, not the young people who put their lives on the line doing what they are asked to do. Do you make that division? If you go to war, that is a policy decision made by the President and the United States Congress. And to blame the men and women who get killed and who get wounded doing what they're supposed to be doing is totally wrong. And by the way, Bill, I think we have learned a lot. So I think while you have seen a lot of criticism, including myself, of the war in Iraq, you have not seen people blaming the Vermont National Guard or the United States military or our soldiers. People have learned that lesson. Just a word on veterans issue, something that I take very seriously. Go back to Vietnam. Let's be very clear, and any veteran here knows this. The way we treated veterans after Vietnam was totally inexcusable. VA did a very poor job. I am happy to tell you there has been a radical transformation. VA is far from perfect, doing a lot better job now than they used to. What have we done in the state? Give you an example of what we've done, which we did not do in Vietnam. Guys in Vietnam, women, most of the guys, came back from the war. Country was divided over the issue, a lot of drugs going on in Vietnam. They came back, got out, they got discharged, and there they were, out on the streets. The truth of the matter is that right now, while we're making progress, one of the shames of this country is that we still have a lot of homeless people who were veterans from Vietnam. A lot of lives were destroyed by Vietnam. We did not serve those veterans well. You know what we're doing now? Which is better. Got a long way to go. So we brought some money back into the state that said this. Iraq is a very, very tough war. It's a different war than Vietnam, different than World War II. People are coming back with a whole lot of post-traumatic stress disorder because every single moment they are on their toes as to whether an explosive can go off. Coming back with traumatic brain injury. In this state, we have worked very closely with General Doobie and the Vermont National Guard. We have an outreach program which literally knocks on the doors of every returning veteran from Iraq and Afghanistan, see how they're doing, see what kind of help they need, paying attention to the needs of their family. We have opened in this state in the last few years a new primary health care facility in Newport and one in Brattleboro to make sure that it is easier for our veterans to get the health care they need. One in Colchester that many veterans are now using is going to be significantly expanded. So what I would say, to answer your question, I think we learned a lesson as a nation from Vietnam. I think there is now a lot more respect for our veterans than there used to be, and that is exactly the right thing.
I cannot start to express my frustration with Congress.
You can't express
Is there hope? It seems that they became a bunch of naysayers that can only point problems and not indicate solutions. Is there hope?
Yeah, okay. Let me answer this. That's a very common question.
I think in recent polling, the ratings, the favorability ratings of Congress is somewhere near the mafia. Maybe falling behind, not sure. Very good. And let me just be very honest with you and say this. A lot of people in the media have this view, and they say, what is the matter with these idiots? Why can't they just get along and work together? Unfortunately, it is more complicated than that. It's more complicated than that. What you're looking at is a nation which is significantly and fundamentally divided. I have to get a little bit partisan here, that's all. That's the reality. I ticked off when I was speaking some of the extraordinary differences that we have. Politically in this country, and I won't give you a long speech on this, historically, there used to be two major parties in this country, Democrats and Republicans. Republicans, what we call a right-center party, conservative party. Dwight D. Eisenhower, George Aiken from the state of Vermont, Bob Stafford, Jim Jeffords. Vermont was a little bit, the Republicans were a little bit more liberal than the national, but people within the mainstream who were kind of conservative. And then you have the Democrats, what we call the center-left party, within the mainstream, a little bit more progressive, more representing working families. What has happened for a variety of reasons is the entire political debate in this country has moved to the right. And I say this without fear of hesitation. The Republican Party has moved from being a center-right party to a right-wing extremist party. That's just the simple fact. Tea Party folks have kind of dominated that party. And this is what these guys want to do. It has to be said. It's not a question of how much money do we put in education. What do we do about health care? For many of these people, the issue is how do we undo virtually every major piece of legislation passed since the 1930s. That's a fact. There are Republican candidates for president who believe that Social Security and Medicare, not that they should be cut, they are unconstitutional. Unconstitutional. We should not have the federal government being involved in health care, retirement security, education. Eliminate. Eliminate the Department of Education. Environmental protection, no way. Eliminate. I'm not talking about cuts in the EPA, which have taken place. Making it a more efficient operation, which I support. Eliminate it. So you have a significant division in this country. I happen to believe, though, that those views, those rather extremist views, are not reflective of more than 5, 10, 15% of the American people. The political challenge that we face is bringing people together around a common sense agenda which speaks about growing the middle class, providing health care to all people, protecting our environment, making sure, as Tom Torty mentioned before, that our kids have the quality education they need to get good jobs. Okay? And I think if we focus on those issues, we can bring people together. But right now, what you got in Congress, there is a civil war going on in Congress. It's because people have very, very different points of view. Okay, all right, I'm going to get to the same man in a second. Questions? Yes, sir, way in the back there. Be loud, your name, please.
Yeah, Bruce Post, Essex.
Yes.
I used to work for Senator
I remember that.
and he used to say that Congress was like a bumblebee. Aerodynamically, it shouldn't fly, but somehow it did. And I would tell him, yes, but it can sting. So there you go. Just a couple observations and a couple, I hate to make geeky recommendations, but I used to write legislation. I'm underwhelmed with the President's higher education proposal of a couple of weeks ago to improve campus-based aid. I'll tell you why. Campus-based aid is made up of 3 ingredients: work study, a grant, which you don't have to repay, and then the Perkins Loan Program.
Yep.
Everybody talks about the burden on students today because they have to repay loans. The President's solution is to put most of that money into the loan program. So that's like going to George Till, who's a physician, saying, whatever you're giving me is making me sick, and he says, let me double the dose. I don't think it makes sense. Secondly, everybody talks about students and their loan burdens. There are a lot of parents who take out loans for their kids. Plus loans, they're called. The interest rate, if you took out a plus loan a few years ago from VSAC, you're going to pay 8.5% interest fixed. I did. I'll be paying until I'm 83 or 84, something like that, at 8.5% interest. And if you take out a federal plus loan today, it's around 7.9% interest. It's no longer variable as it once was. I just think it's nuts. And when you get a chance on your committee to deal with higher ed, I hope you'll keep that in mind. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Let me pick up on Bruce's point and tell you a story. A couple stories. We held some meetings on college campuses around the state. We're up in Johnson State. A lot of kids around. It was a great meeting. A young lady comes up. She raises her hand, stands up. Says, Senator Sanders, I'm the first person in my family to go to college. I went to graduate school. I am now, I can't remember what, $70,000, $80,000 in debt. And tears were streaming down her eyes. I don't know how I'm going to pay that debt. And that is true all over this country, and it's also true, as Bruce points out, a lot of parents are going deeply in debt to make sure their kids go to college. Here's the bottom line issue about that. If we were in Germany right now, talking about how much college students are in debt, what would the answer be? They're not. Because throughout Europe, Scandinavia, to some degree Canada, governments have said what I think is eminently sensible. The children, the young people, are the future of this country. It is insane. It is insane that we do not make sure they get the best quality education they can, regardless of the income of their families. That is an investment that we have to make, not just at the college level, equally important at the child care level. So the kids from zero, in a very competitive global economy, if you don't have the best trained workforce. So the idea that kids have got to go tens of thousands of dollars in debt, parents have got to go in debt, so they go out and get a decent job, makes no sense to me. Give you one more example on an issue we've been working very hard on, have some success. Without getting into all of the issues of health care in this country, why we pay the most, why we have 50 million people without any health insurance at all. One of the significant problems has to do with primary health care. Primary health care. The inability of people to find a doctor when they need a doctor. We were successful in the healthcare reform bill to double the amount of money going into the community health center program, meaning that 20 million more Americans are going to be accessing primary health care. One of the things we did in that is triple funding for a program called the National Health Service Corps. Talk to a young person going into medical school or dental school, you know what they will tell you? They're going to come out of school $150,000, $200,000 in debt. Do you think they're going to go into primary health care? Do you think they're going to go into areas where they're really needed? No, they're going to go into areas where they can make a whole lot of money. So we triple funding for the National Health Service Corps to pay off their indebtedness. But how counterproductive it is to have doctors, dentists, nurses graduating with huge debts so that they don't get into the areas where we really need them. But your point is well taken. And I got to tell you, there's a debate going on right now. Some of my Republican friends would slash Pell Grants, make it hard. You think we should put more money into grants? I agree with you. They want to cut. One of the debates going on. Okay, now we're going to hear from the future generation. Okay, Old Navy, what do we got?
What are the best ways that we can help prevent global warming?
Excellent. Good question. And what is your name?
Carl.
Okay, Carl. Good question. Very good question. One of the frustrations that I have is not only that as a nation we are not addressing the crisis of global warming, we can't even get many members of the Congress to acknowledge its reality. Now, I won't go again into a long speech on this. We take for granted that the way we look at issues is what we call science-based. Information comes to us from people whom we respect. If you go to a doctor, you want to know that doctor was in medical school, has a scientific background for the therapies that he or she prescribes to us. That's the way the world that we live in. In terms of people who study climatology and global warming, there is virtually no debate. The overwhelming preponderance of evidence and the vast majority of scientists believe global warming is real. It is most likely created by man-made activities. How do you deal with it? This is how you deal with it. You move aggressively away from fossil fuel, coal and oil, to sustainable energy, to energy conservation. We transform our transportation system, more emphasis on rail, public transportation, electrification of our vehicle system, and internal combustion engines. They got 60 or 70 miles per gallon. If we move aggressively in those areas, we can substantially lower greenhouse gas emissions. As a state, by the way, we should be very, very proud. We are leading the nation in terms of energy efficiency. Our major utilities, electric companies today, are selling us less electricity than they used to because of energy efficiency. And I think we can do a lot better than we are doing. But we should be proud that we're leading the nation. So, Carl, that's some of what we have to do, I think, to combat global warming. Okay, other questions? Gentleman right here.
Hi, I'm Lance Collier. As the vote to amend is gaining strength, the backlash is also gaining strength. I wonder if you'd characterize, either you or Ginny, some of the major counter-arguments to it and how you would respond to them.
Yeah, the counter-arguments are, look, I've seen them on the Wall Street Journal elsewhere. People like Bernie Sanders want to deny freedom of speech, the great American tradition, because they may disagree with the ideas that are out there. That's the major argument. We're anti-freedom. This is a way of controlling the ability of people who we disagree with from expressing their point of view. What the amendment that I have offered, the constitutional amendment that I have offered, says something that's pretty simple. It says, first of all, corporations are not people. Radical statement. Second of all, what we have had for many years is that state legislatures and the United States Congress have the right to regulate campaign finance. So I think what you will see is all of these money guys who are just profoundly delighted. Think of the opportunity that they now have. Can you imagine going into their billions and billions of dollars to dominate the political process? So they're going to come up with a whole lot of organizations and think tanks who are going to attack people like Ginny and me and many others. I don't think they have a whole lot to be said. I just debated a guy the other day. To say that money is speech and denying people the right to spend as much money as they want is a restriction on their freedom of speech, I don't think it carries a whole lot of weight. So that's kind of the argument. I think we can respond to it pretty effectively. Sir?
Hi, Bernie. My name is Dave Barrington. First of all, I want to thank you for protecting the democracy. And this is another question about Citizens United. I get the part about money isn't speech, and I am really deeply disturbed by the influence of these large anonymous donations. But I think we need a strategy that doesn't just say what corporations are not, but what they are. And I'd like you to take that ball and run with it. And in particular, at its essence, a corporation is a group of people. And that group of people forms an entity that does have certain rights. For instance, some rights that begin to sound like the rights of individuals. And if you could, I think it would be wise for us to sort of address that part of it, because I think it's part of the argument that we need to use to counter the right thing.
Well, I think, Dave, all that I want to say on that, I want to give a long speech, is, there will be some people, Wall Street Journal and others, who will say that if my amendment is passed, what Ginny is trying to do is pass, it'll wreak havoc with corporate America. All I can tell you that is exactly untrue. Of course, corporations have rights, they have the right to do business, they have the right to engage in contracts and all of that. Our focus is fairly narrow, and as I've said many, many times, I think our democracy is threatened when corporations can go into their own treasury, spend as much money as they want on a political campaign. So all we are saying is, number one, corporations are not people. in terms of freedom of speech aspects. Corporations cannot contribute to individual candidates. Legislatures and the Congress have the right to regulate campaign spending. Nothing more than that.
Can I say
yes,
one
sir.
quick thing about that? About the limitations we have.
I will get to you in a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Earlier, you correctly noted that we're spending more now for defense spending, military spending than we were in the Cold War, but, which is true. But another thing he also noted that I find a little bit troublesome is the positive spin you put on the fact that during World War II, we put the economy on a war footing and get a lot of things done. That's not necessarily a good thing. Some of us oppose war for more than one reason, precisely because of the centralization of power to come from it. And I think centralization of political power and centralization of corporate power are two sides of the same coin. And in some of us, this right versus left, the left wants to government enforce equality, the right wants a government enforce order. There's some of us who want human liberty and they don't want either. And that big government and big corporations are always in bed with one another, and you're not going to limit corporate power without limiting government power. So whether you're Tea Party or whether you're Occupy Wall Street or whatever, you got to limit both. And the fact to think that you're going to have the government take care of all these things, but stay out of the and not have a military-industrial policy in our complex is foolish. We've got. I mean, maybe those who want to cut back government in the domestic arena, and those who want to cut back government in the military-industrial policy, should get together and say, look, we've got this out-of-control corporate government axis, and that basically both sides, both left and right, are responsible for this. Because one wants to expand government for the sake of managing a domestic policy, and one wants to expand government for the sake of running a military policy, and they both create a centralization of power that is just inviting corruption. So I don't see how you get rid of corruption without getting rid of it.
Thank you for your question. It's a good question, and I think in my opening remarks I wasn't as clear as I should have been, and you picked up on that. What I meant by using Roosevelt 1941 as an example is tying that to the crisis of global warming right now. Kind of what I meant is that if we move aggressively in transforming our energy system, I believe that we can start the process of reversing global warming. I don't think that necessarily, I happen to believe, you and I may disagree on this, that government does have a responsibility. Okay, and that's fine. And that's a legitimate debate. What is the proper role of government in a democratic society? Some people believe more. I happen to believe, as I think all of you know, that healthcare, for example, should be a right of all people. And I think that as a nation, we don't do well if all of our kids, regardless of income, get the best education that they want, that they need. So we can go on and on, and I think we may have an honest difference of point of view, but you picked up on a point. What I simply meant to say that in 1941, this country faced an imminent danger, and it responded in 2 years rather extraordinarily. My point was that given the technologies that are out there right now in terms of solar, wind, geothermal, we can make a huge transformation in our approach toward energy, private, public, working together. That's kind of the point that I made, but you picked up on a valid point. Okay, let's get the young person right here, okay.
I have a plan to fix our economy. I have a plan to fix our economy.
You have a plan, all right, come to Washington with me on Monday, I'll go back, okay. What's your plan?
Well, first we should make profit sharing for corporations mandatory. Second, I have a progressive taxing program. Would you like to hear it?
Briefly.
So here's how it goes. People that make over $10 million have to pay 55% in income tax. People that make $10 million, 50%. And it keeps going down by increments of 5 every million until we reach 1 million to 20,000, and that's 2.5% taxes. And people that make under 20,000 don't have to pay any income tax at all.
Okay. I will let Mr. Johnson know about your plan. But here, what's your name, by the way?
My name is Finn Cleary.
Okay. your first point was profit sharing and so forth. Let me take off on that and move a little bit. One of the nice things we're doing in the state, many of you don't know, is that we have a number of companies that are involved not only in profit sharing, they're moving toward kind of worker cooperatives. Do you know that? Some really good companies out there that are saying, and they get together every year, that it is good for the company when the people who are employed have a lot of say about what goes on. King Arthur Flour down in Norwich does a good job. The Gardner Supply right here is doing a good job. It's an interesting concept. Vermont, by the way, is leading the nation. Okay, let's go around. Sir, right here. Be loud and give us your name.
Larry Schick.
Larry?
I have a statement, not a question.
Okay.
I think we pretty much all agree on what he is talking about here amongst us. Why don't you consider running for president?
Let me just, that's very kind. Thank you all. In my life, some of you know my political history. I am, I think, not just the longest serving independent in the history of the Congress. I am probably the only United States Senator in American history who has run for statewide office back in the 70s, got 2%, 1%, 4%, 6%. The odds of that candidate making it to the United States Senate, if you bet on me then to make it to the Senate, you'd be a very wealthy guy today. So I don't want to stretch my luck. I am, on a personal level, if I can, just not only enormously proud to represent our state. We do meetings like this, and one of the advantages you have as a United States Senator, go all over the state, you see all kinds of great people. We have great people. And I think our values are a little bit different than some other places around the country, what we believe in, what we're striving for. And, you know, it's been an honor beyond my wildest dreams to think that I would be elected to the United States Senate. Now, the other point that I want to make is I want to continue to represent Vermont because, and this is absolutely true, okay, I go all over the country, I do a national radio show and all this stuff. People are looking to this state for national leadership in a wide variety of ways. If we become the first state in this country to adopt a single-payer healthcare system, it will have profound impacts on healthcare throughout the state. We are leading the country I mentioned before in energy efficiency. We brought Sandia National Lab here, can help us go further. Think about what a model we will be for the country if we are leading in sustainable energy and energy efficiency. In terms of education, we can play a great role. So I am proud to be Vermont's Senator. Thank you for sending me there. But at this moment, that's as high as my... I am an ambitious guy, but that's as high as I intend to be going in the immediate future. Let's get a gentleman in the glasses right there, sir. Yeah. Yes, no. There are two gentlemen in the glasses. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Norman Henry Colchester. The average amount of Social Security payments after 45 years at 12.5%, which is what it is now, is about $1,300 a month. The thrift savings plan available to you and other government employees, you should be 12.5% for 45 years, and then millionaires. Which is a better program?
Well, I think members, first of all, I am not on that program. It was, in terms, you're talking about the pension program for members of Congress? Okay, but you should understand.
Not the pension per se. The thrift savings plan is an addition to the program. It's an investment program. It's comparable with Social Security.
So you have different options as to what you want to invest in. Right. Well, all I can say about Social Security is, your point was what? Should we...
$1,300 a month after contributing 12.5% of your income to a
Well, you're not contributing, well, if you're self-employed, you're contributing 12.5. If you're a worker, you're doing 6.2.
Yeah, I love that deception.
That's not a deception.
The employer pays 6.2, the employee pays 6.2.
Right.
But in order to cover your 12.4, the employer is paying you 12.4. In order for the employer to hire you, it costs 12.
That's not necessarily true, because the employer is also paying taxes. You're arguing that that's money coming out of your wages. The employer also has to provide health care and so forth and so on. So I don't accept that the
employer doesn't pay your taxes.
No, the employer is paying taxes. If your argument were consistent, everything that the employer has to pay is not part of your salary.
It's part of your salary. If it costs, whatever it costs the employer to have you work for him is your income.
No, I don't accept that. You are paying 6.2% of your, most workers, unless you're self-employed.
Yeah.
Okay, are paying 6.2%. That's what they're paying. If you're self-employed, you're paying 12.4, but if you're a worker, you're paying 6.2. Bottom line, if you're asking me, do I think Social Security is a strong program which should be strengthened? I do. Do I believe it should be privatized? I don't. Okay, I have a point. I'm giving you my point. Okay, gentleman right there.
Hi, Senator Sanders. My name is Ron Rusati. I'm a volunteer for the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. Because I lost a father and father-in-law to pancreatic cancer. So I want to thank you for co-sponsoring S362, the Pancreatic Cancer Research and Education Act, and for your continued support. And I'd like to thank all you up there for everything you do, too.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Butler from Jericho, and I just want to tell everyone in the room, if you're from Bolton, Jericho or Underhill, we still have the petitions here for our amendment question for town meeting. This is an historic document. I think we brought them because we want everyone to have an opportunity to sign this historic document. And they're right here, and we can do it after the meeting.
Thank you, Bill. Ma'am?
My name is Ellen Goodman. I'm from Underhill. First of all, I have to say that I never disagree with you. I would say
You want to get married? My wife disagrees with you.
But I have to disagree with one thing you said in your opening statements. You said there are 5 people who believe that Citizens United, that corporations are people, and there are 6. Mitt Romney. Put that aside. I also have to say that I'm a big watcher of MSNBC, and I'm also very proud every time I see you on those shows. However, Elliot Spitzer brought up a tentacle of Citizens United that I hadn't thought of. Networks are corporations, and MSNBC is owned by GE.
Actually, Comcast now.
Yeah. I thought they were the parent company of GE.
No, they recently.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my point is, and I love it, but there's also Fox News, and they definitely influence the political conversation and possibly move the needle one way or the other. So honestly, I'm a little bit, and I totally, agree that corporations aren't people, but, being that they have made a business of political discourse, I'm wondering, how are they affected by the amendment?
I mean, some people, like anything else, you can take an extremist and an alarmist position and say what Sanders or Ginny Lyons has wanted to do, nobody on television is going to be able to express an opinion. Clearly that is not the goal, and that's not what would happen. The issue of media is a whole other issue, and one of the issues we work on with, it's a hard issue, is the degree to which a relatively small number of media conglomerates control what the American people see, hear, and read, and not just Fox. How you have a more diversified media so that more points of view are out there is a very important issue. But there's nothing that I, am advocating which would have any impact on Fox or anybody else for that matter. Yes, ma'am.
Hi,
I'm Carol Smith from Jericho. Why was our nuclear power plant given this clean bill of health by the federal government to operate for the next 20 years when it's kind of a mess?
Well, you're asking the wrong guy. There are a couple of issues there, Carol. And I'm on the Energy Committee, which has jurisdiction over the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Legally, what we have in the country is the federal government, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, solely is the authority over the safety issues of America's nuclear power plants, including Yankee. So you may have an opinion about safety. You may be concerned that the model in Vernon is the same model that had its problems in Japan, melted down in Japan. But that is not an issue, by the way, that the Vermont State Legislature has jurisdiction of. All of that has been given to the federal government. The NRC, in its wisdom, has reauthorized the contract and said that Vermont Yankee can continue to exist for many more years. I should tell you that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has never once not extended the life of any nuclear power plant. Every single one that's come before, they expand. So that should, give you some poise up for thought about where they're coming from. The fight that we're making right now in Vermont, where the governor is involved and the Vermont legislature is involved, is for non-safety reasons. You with me? Vermont has no jurisdiction over the safety. That's the NRC in Washington. For non-safety reasons, can the state of Vermont shut down, not extend the license of Vermont Yankee? The law, to my mind, is quite clear that it can. If the governor and the legislation, the state senate, Jenny, I think it was a 26-4 vote against extending the license of Vermont Yankee. If the Vermont state legislation, the people of the state say, we want to move energy in a different direction than nuclear power, should they have the right? I think the law is pretty clear, and I strongly disagree with the ruling that Judge Bertha made on that issue. Let's go. Yes, woman. Yes.
My name is Cheryl Eaton, and I'm from Jericho.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hi. So this time of year, I always wish that I owned a bulldozer, because I'd really like to take it to Washington and take down Capitol Hill completely. I might pull up the Vermont delegation, because I'm quite proud of that, but I feel like everything that we've talked about is actually a symptom of a deeper systems problem in Washington. And despite all the campaign promises, whether you're a presidential candidate or a senator or a representative, they then are transported to Washington, where there are really two entities at work. Those people and then the corporations. And the wealthiest that run the corporations. In my humble opinion, what then gets taken out of the loop is us. We really, with present company executive, really don't have representatives down there. So my question is, we can handle all these little symptoms, but what are we doing to solve the deeper systems problem?
Cheryl, I agree with what you said. And not just what Cheryl said is that, and by the way, and I thank you, Cheryl, it is not just me. There are other people who are working 10, 15 hours a day from states around the country whose names you don't know. They don't necessarily get on the front page of the New York Times. So we're really trying to represent the middle class and working people. But they are a minority. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. What Cheryl is saying in so many words is that you have a Congress that is dominated by big money. And you're absolutely right. Cheryl, I could tell you, you can figure out yourself if you're good with the internet, piece of legislation after piece of legislation that comes before the floor, and I can tell you exactly who's paying for that legislation. Okay? So, what's the remedy? The remedy of that is what I would call, not getting people too nervous here, a political revolution. What do we mean by that? What we mean by that, I mean, this is where it touches on Citizens United, because if you think that it has been bad in the past, and it has been bad, it's going to be much, much worse. Cheryl, you put yourself, think about it. You're a member of the United States Senate. You are concerned about the behavior of Wall Street. You're concerned about the role that banks play in our economy, okay? Bill comes up there, and you say, it's a good bill. I'm going to vote for that bill. Then at the back of your mind, you're saying, if I vote for that bill, I'm going to go home next weekend. I'm going to have hundreds of thousands of dollars of 30-second ads distorting my position. With me? Lying about me. All kinds of crap out there. Maybe I should not vote for that piece of legislation. So if you think it was bad, it's going to get worse. Let me tell you something else. People don't know this. Most people don't know this. People in Washington know this. Members of Congress spend an enormous amount of time raising funds. That's what they do. There are some people who spend 2 or 3 hours every single day on the telephone, going down a big list, trying to raise money. Citizens United will make them do it even more. So Cheryl hit it right on the head. The issue is not that Republicans and Democrats hate each other, they can't get along. That's not the issue. The real issue is you have a situation where Congress is heavily dominated by money. One clear example of that. We are in a recession today, in my view, because of the illegal and reckless behavior of Wall Street. Wall Street was able to do what they did in terms of mergers, in terms of coming up with all kinds of financial tools that made no sense at all, because they were deregulated. Programs like the legislation was repealed. Do you know how much Wall Street spent in a 10-year period to get that deregulation? $5 billion. $5 billion. They got what they wanted, they were off and running, and they brought the world economy to its feet. So what is the answer, Cheryl? The answer is the following, in my view, is that people all over the country have got to be holding meetings like this. We have got to be determining what the most important issues are for our children, our family, the world that we're living in. We've got to elect people who are prepared to stand up and fight. We've got to have real campaign finance reform. Citizens United is a disaster, but I don't want to tell you that what existed before Citizens United was good. Okay, it wasn't. Far too much dependence on big money. So we have to move to what I consider called public funding of elections. Okay? Which I think will make your candidates much more responsive to ordinary people. Last point that I want to make. There are millions of people who feel exactly the same way that Cheryl felt. They are distressed by what's going on. All I can say, and Martin Luther King Jr. used to say this, the arc of history is wide, and it points toward justice. I want you to think back. It wasn't, when I grew up, when I was a young man, some of you my age, there were people in this country, because of their color, who couldn't drink from a water fountain, could not vote. Change took place. It wasn't until 1924 that women in this country had the right to vote. Okay? Women had fought and struggled for decade after decade to make that happen. Change happens, Cheryl. All right? It is not going to happen tomorrow. But there are tens of millions of people who are equally disgusted. The goal is you can't withdraw from the system. You can't say, God, everything is awful, I'm not going to be involved. And you're living in, clearly, a state which is a lot more advanced than many other states, to say the least. But what we have got to do is reach out to folks all over this country at the grassroots level and bring people together around an agenda which says, to answer Cheryl's question, that government of the United States should be working for ordinary people and not for the top 1%. That's what it's about.
I'm Susan Murray Graves from Underhill, and actually I'm here to sign one of those petitions, but my comment was specifically about public financing campaigns. And since you brought it up anyway, is there any indication that this is something that's getting real, interest and backing up in Washington, D.C.?
There is some, not a whole lot. Vermont has made some efforts, not enough, I think. Some states have done better. Maine has done a fairly good job. The answer is, I think, probably we'll see it move more at the local level than at the national. So there's some interest in Washington enough. Why don't we, before everybody leaves, why don't we just say we'll take, how many more people we have in line there? 1, 2, 2. All right, why don't we take, say, 4 more questions or comments? Ma'am, right there.
Yes. Hello, my name is Londa Richardson, and I will be from Underhill as soon as my husband and I finish moving up here. And I would appreciate your opinion. I have been very disappointed with President Obama. I voted for him, and frankly, I think he's been a wimp. And I've written to him several times and told him that he should pay attention to Senator Sanders. But when I watched his State of the Union address, I felt a little bit of the wimpiness was going away. And I wondered if my theory is he maybe can be a little bit more chutzpah in his second term, if he gets a second term, and I hope he does, than in his first term. But have you seen any signs of increasing chutzpah?
I've heard that expression within this context. The chutzpah element.
All right, this is what I do think. I think there are a lot of people. Let me just say this. I'm not going to tell you that the president is an intimate friend of mine. He's not. But when he was in the Senate, we were on the same committees together. He was kind enough to come here to Vermont when I was running for the Senate. I've had the opportunity to chat with him in the Oval Office, gone to a number of meetings with him. So I know him reasonably well. Let me just say this about the president. First of all, he is a very, very smart guy. Do not underestimate his intelligence. There are very few issues that you're going to raise with the President of the United States that he does not have significant familiarity with. You may end up disagreeing with where he's coming down. He knows the issues. Talking about single-payer health care, he understands single-payer health care. He understands global warming, etc., etc. I think, for whatever reason, I think it goes way back in his history, he is kind of conflict averse. And what his view has been is that we can work with right-wing Republicans. Why don't we do post-partisan politics? Let's all work together. I think he has, to answer your question, Susan, begin to have caught on that after the most obstructionist Senate and Congress in the modern history of this country, that maybe he's going to have to change his tact a little bit. So I think you have seen in the last couple of months him learning some of the lessons that a number of us have been trying to get him to talk about. He is now coming out saying very clearly that it is unfair to extend tax breaks for the wealthiest people in this country, and that if we're serious about deficit reductions, the wealthy are going to have to start paying their fair share of taxes. All right? He is beginning to talk about income and wealth inequality in America. He's beginning to touch on a number of other issues. I think, in fact, if you look at what he is talking about, it is exactly what the American people wanted him to talk about. I was on the floor of the Senate, you may remember, a year or so ago for 8 hours. And the reason I was on the floor was to say to this president, you got the White House. The Democrats then had the House of Representatives. You have the United States Senate. Why in God's name are you extending, when we have a huge deficit, Bush's tax breaks for the rich and giving them even more tax breaks? See, I said that in 5 seconds. I said 8 hours there. But I think his strategy must be, if he talks sense to the American people about what's going on with the middle class, comes up with issues on protecting our college kids, making college more affordable, creating jobs through transforming our energy systems, rebuilding our infrastructure. You know what? He will win by a landslide. But I think he has got to understand that at the end of the day, there are real differences. You're going to have to take on right-wing obstructionism. You're going to have to take on big money interests. You're going to have to make the middle class rally to your support.
My name is Chris West. I live in Jericho. And first I wanted to say that I'm always proud to hear about what you're doing in the Senate. And my family and friends support you wholeheartedly.
Thanks, Chris.
I lived in the Netherlands until 2 years ago, for 10 years. And one of the things that was very clear to me is that Europe and the European countries cannot, by Americans, being looked at as individual countries. We really have to look at those as states, because anything larger is unmanageable. The reason that the Dutch have such a good healthcare system is because there are only 16 million of them. They're able to, on that state, like a state level, really get down to brass tacks about how they want to manage and micromanage their own situation. So my question is it not an idea to change the tax structure so that more money that's going to the federal government that is being mismanaged by just about all of our opinion be devolved back to the state, where Governor Shumlin and the types of things that can be dealt with on a much more local level, so that we can actually get a single-payer health care plan like Governor Shumlin is talking about, and have the money to do that, instead of sending it to Washington, where almost everybody agrees 40 cents out of every dollar just evaporates.
The answer is in general yes. I mean, I think, and here's why I think that. I believe in a single-payer system, but it is not a system dominated by Washington. California is different than Vermont, no question about it. You have to have certain basic foundations. Should everybody, as a citizen in California or Vermont, have health care as a right? The answer is yes. Will they do it differently in California, perhaps, than we will in Vermont? Yes. But I think once you establish certain standards, we can go forward. And in terms of health care, picking up on a point that Tom Tony made of it, I want everybody here to understand that while we have 50 million people uninsured, while our health care outcomes in terms of infant mortality, longevity, other indices are not as good as many other countries, we are spending almost twice as much per person on health care as any other nation. So do I believe that if Vermont took all of its health care dollars, including the money that goes to Washington, brought it back home, threw it on the table, and developed a system guaranteeing health care to all people, do I think we can do it more cost-effective way than we do in Washington? Absolutely. And that is kind of what we're striving for. Okay, let me take about 3 more. We finish with the line here, Phil? Okay, yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Pat Crocker.
Happy loud so people can
My
hear.
name is Pat Crocker. I'm from Essex, and I work in the healthcare field. I have a statement, and then I guess mostly statements. You alluded to the fact that our country has the poorer outcomes, and I just want to let people know that that's not necessarily true, that when you correct for homicides and accidents, our country actually is at the top of the list for life expectancy. Our infant mortality rates in this country are also skewed because we bring more high-risk pregnancies to term than in other countries, because we do have a good medical care system. And in other countries, they don't count low birth weight infants as live births. So their numbers are very skewed. On top of that, 80% of innovations in the medical field have come from this country, and 18 of the 25 last Nobel Peace Prize winners in medicine have come to this country. So I dispute the fact that you're saying that our outcomes are not good. We also do spend more, and a lot of that increased expense is government waste. A lot of it too is that people will often spend more because they want to spend more. A private room or a type of intervention that's not covered. Now, I'm all for patients having choices. Every one of you being able to decide what you have your medical care coverage, what services you want to get, and whether it's an insurance company that's saying these are certain benefits. It's no different than a 5-member board telling you what's going to be covered under a single-payer plan. And I really would advocate for people to think about this some more, that it should be in your control. You should be able to have your money through health savings accounts, which, by the way, may be taken off the table, and having a health savings account so that you can spend your money the way you see fit, and to have a safety net for people who can't afford it.
Thank you. Okay. I appreciate your remarks. I disagree. Okay, we got 2 more. Ma'am, right there.
Joan Stoddard, and I'm from Williston, formerly of Jericho. And
I'm a political talk show junkie. I watch practically all of them on TV. And I came in on the middle of one on MSNBC. And they were saying that we contribute money to China to help rebuild their infrastructure. Where are we getting the money to give to China? And why are we helping to rebuild their infrastructure and not our own?
Well, the answer is I don't think we are. I think probably what somebody was saying or meant to say is that we are rebuilding the infrastructure in Afghanistan and in Iraq. I don't think we're rebuilding the infrastructure in China, but I will say this, in terms of infrastructure, China is spending 9% of its GDP rebuilding its own infrastructure. If you go to China, my chief of staff went there, they're putting huge amounts of money into high-speed rail, cell phone service, so forth and so on. We're spending 2%. So I think the real question is, people are asking is, we are rebuilding the infrastructure of Iraq and Afghanistan, and some people think maybe we should worry more about Vermont and America than those countries. Okay, all right, there you go.
Well, I just want to say it's nice, and I want to get out of here and go outside, but it's good to see you, Bernie. From the first time I saw Bernie, it was the legal aid lawyer with his socks falling down. But he helped me take down Saga. They had the first free breakfast program in Burlington, so.
This has been a great meeting, and I thank everybody for coming out. I guess I want to conclude by saying, as I understand there are people in the room who have differences of opinion. That's called democracy, and I am proud of that. And it's important that we feel free to express our point of view. We do it in a civil way. Most importantly, it is terribly important in these difficult moments of American history that we be thinking about the issues facing our country, that we participate fully and as effectively as we can in the political process. And when you do that, you honor not only the founding fathers, but every person who fought and died to defend American freedom. Thank you all very much for being here.
Jenny, thank you.
I'd like to see President.